the texture of your hair? Who taught you to hate the color of your skin to such extent that you bleach to get like the white man? Who taught you to hate the shape of your nose and the shape of your lips? Who taught you to hate yourself from the top of your head to the soles of your feet? Who taught you to hate your own kind? Who taught you to hate the race that you belong to?
Welcome again to Street Talk. My name is Ammahad Shekarakki, and on Street Talk, what we try to do, we talk about things happening in Michigan, the state, the country, out of this country, and we cover political, social, and economics. Joining me tonight, my friend, Mr. Dennis Burnside. Hey.
How's it going, man?
And another friend, Doug Warren.
All right, I'm back here trolling.
Let's just open this up with: do we have a democracy?
No.
Yeah.
No. Let's start with things fairly local and regional that people will remember.
Okay.
Rick Snyder comes out of nowhere. Wealthy man, calls himself a nerd, puts in a lot of his own money, and he's able to generate millions of dollars, and he runs a campaign where he's this unambitious nerd who just wants to set things right, get things correct. So he's elected because people are looking for a sensible solution to all this nonsense they see going on around them. First thing Snyder does is he gives a $1.6 billion handout to his friends in big business, calling it tax relief. Then he declares a $1.6 billion budget deficit. And our emasculated, defanged media doesn't connect the dots. You don't have to be Einstein. You don't have to be a math major to say, wait a minute. We had a balanced budget. Mm-hmm. He gave away $1.6 billion to his corporate cronies. Mm-hmm. And now he's declaring a $1.6 billion deficit that we've got to balance on the back of our school children, mm-hmm. Yep. On our elderly, mm-hmm. on our retired mm-hmm. government workers. Mm-hmm. Their pensions are now taxed. Mm-hmm. All these draconian methods to fill in this hole in the budget that he blew in there himself.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
People don't stop to think, wait a minute. What's this guy doing other than just giving away money to his friends? Mm-hmm. Same exact thing happened in Wisconsin. Here we go with vacation brain again. The governor of Wisconsin comes in there, and Scott Walker comes in there and does the exact same thing.
Yeah,
he hands off more than $1 billion to his mm-hmm. corporate cronies, and then he declares a government budget mm-hmm. emergency, and we've got to balance the budgets. Mm-hmm. And here's how we're going to do it: we're going to do it on the back of the poor. We're going to do it on the back of the disadvantaged. Mm-hmm. Well, people in Wisconsin caught on to it pretty quickly. Yeah. The school teachers, the government workers, mm-hmm. the unionized people. They said, we're not going to have this happen. Mm-hmm. So then we moved into a recall season. Mm-hmm. And again, just like we talked about in one of our earlier shows, you had exit polling showing that Scott Walker was going to be defeated. He was going to be recalled from office.
Yeah.
But when the polls actually came out, they stopped speculating about 20 minutes to 8 Central Standard Time and declared him the winner. Well, the only person in the media who I've seen have the courage to stand up and say, wait a minute, what's going on here, is Brad Friedman, who has a blog called the Brad Blog. And Brad Friedman's been covering the corrupt and suspicious elections we've had in this country since 2000. And he just went down with the facts and said, again, in the same counties where we've had election crimes happen before, electioneering, mm-hmm. we've had it happen again. And Scott Walker probably lost that recall mm-hmm. Election in Wisconsin mm-hmm. a couple months ago. But he's back in office, and everyone acts as if it didn't happen, mm-hmm. acts as if there's no controversy. And then you move back to Michigan, away from electioneering. We have Snyder say, look, Benton Harbor, Highland Park, Detroit, Flint, Saginaw, Pontiac, you can't afford democracy. So we're gonna call it an emergency. We're gonna put a manager in there, and he's gonna take away your ability to self-govern, mm-hmm. and he's also gonna take away your public works and your public mm-hmm. assets, sell them off to the lowest bidder. In fact, we won't even have a bid. Mm-hmm. We're just gonna hand those off to our friends, mm-hmm. and everyone says, okay, it's fine because they can't handle democracy.
Right.
They're too poor.
Mm-hmm.
That's what we call democracy in this country today. Now, by any objective measure, by any standard that's ever been established in the world about what democracy means and what it means to be part of representative government. This has nothing to do with that. This is the exact opposite. Previously, Doug has used the word fascism. I couldn't agree more. Because again, what you have is corporate control over the government, with the government having a very belligerent foreign policy with respect to war, and also a government that has a very authoritarian bent to it. Mm-hmm. Now you have people being sentenced to prison for small amounts of drugs for years and years and years, and when they come out, they're not able to vote. Mm-hmm. You have people losing their homes for fraudulent paperwork, and then when they protest, they're thrown into jail. Mm-hmm. We could spend the rest of this show talking about the crimes that are being committed in the name of a democratic society, when we just should stop giving it credence and saying this isn't democratic. This is certainly not democratic. I don't know if you want to call it fascism. I don't know if you want to call it authoritarianism. I don't know if you want to call it tomato soup, but it's not democracy. And we've got to get to what this is and address it from that perspective.
So, Doug, what do you think about it?
Well, I agree completely with Dennis. And the thing I like to point out to my my light-skinned friends with regard to Benton Harbor and Detroit, what's going on in places like that is, and I warn them, and there's no question that this will happen, is when the fascist corporate takeover, when they're done stealing everything from the black folks, from the minority folks, they're going to next turn to places like the Sleeping Bear Dunes, Porcupine Mountains National Park. They're going to turn to the Manistee and Hiawatha National Forests. And they're going to start taking that stuff. They're going to start privatizing it. And they're going to start enacting cover charges. And everyday citizens who have owned those things for well over 100 years in many cases have been owned by the state. You're not going to be able to get in to see that stuff anymore. Once they're done stealing everything that's not nailed down in Detroit and Flint and Benton Harbor and places like that, and Muskegon and Saginaw, they're going to come and steal everything from all you white folks out there in the boondocks. And you aren't going to be able to go ride your ATV. You aren't going to be able to go hunting where you want to go hunting, where your families went hunting on state land for years, because you're not going to be able to get in, because it's going to be shut down. It's going to be privatized. That's where I see this going.
And there again, you go back to the market, the magic, so-called magic of the free market, where the free market is supposed to be rational. Mm-hmm. And because it's so rational and it's predicated on what the will of the dollar is, everything balances out. Well, what we're seeing is the dollars are being vacuumed into a very small percentage of the population. Okay. We're talking about the Walton family, for example, from Walmart fame. The Walton family has more money than the bottom 40% of the United States population. We're talking about probably 135, 140 million people. The Walton family has more money than all those people combined. What's rational about that? That's too much power, because when you have that much economic power, you have the ability to call the shots. It no longer matters what the right argument is. It doesn't matter what the argument is predicated on righteousness or logic or what is for the good of the people. That no longer matters. It matters where the power is. And the power follows the money. And that's the reason why it's so dangerous what you're seeing happen with Wall Street, who before Bush even declared the first bailout had $12 trillion funneled to them from the Fed. Doug can back me up on this. A lot of people don't know that story. $12 trillion. Then Bush declared an economic emergency after the economic collapse in the fall of 2008, September 2008. So they had another $7 trillion funneled into Wall Street. That kind of money and that kind of leverage and that kind of power is extremely dangerous. And I don't know that we'll ever see how far that can go, because we're right in the middle of that storm right now. Where it ends, we just don't know. But let the middle class have an emergency where the housing market collapses. And most people now owe more on their house than it's worth because of the value of the collapse of the housing market. Well, we got to let the free market reign. Yeah, let's get involved in that. We got to let the free market correct that.
Let's point out too that the Fed is not only printing up this money, this At last count, I saw it was like $28.7 trillion. This is well over a year ago. So it's in the stratosphere as far as that goes at this point. But they're not only hoarding that money on Wall Street. They're supposed to be lending it out, but they're not. They're hoarding it. And you can go on YouTube and watch the news for any length of time, and you'll find out. You can go Google this stuff and find out that they've just been hoarding the money, and they've been called out in Congress in congressional hearings for it. They're not only keeping the money, though, for themselves, they're loaning it to banks overseas. So a lot of this money is untraceable because there's no record of it. And there's a famous clip you can see on YouTube of Ben Bernanke. This must be 2 years ago now. And I forget who it was. It was a congressman, the former congressman from Florida. I forget the guy's name. But anyway, he says, where's this money at? He says, we don't know. We're not going to tell you. That's what Bernanke says on C-SPAN. You can see this video to this day. It's just, they are out of control. They're worse than crack addicts. They're worse than meth heads because not only are they destroying themselves, ultimately, this is what this system will do, they are taking away people's pensions. They're stealing the death benefits of veterans. This is in Bloomberg News. I'm not making this stuff up. They're stealing the death benefits of veterans who die in combat. Their families are supposed to receive insurance money, and the Wall Street banks are stealing the money, and they're not giving it to the people who supposedly die for our freedom. It's just the crimes go on and on and on, and nobody's been punished except for Bernie Madoff, who stole from the bigwigs, and that's why he's sitting under a jail somewhere right now. The people who are doing all the stealing from the people on Main Street, they're still counting their money.
And continue to steal.
Yeah, you got it, yeah.
So to your original question about democracy, what we have is a facsimile of democracy, but we don't have one person, one vote. We don't have a system where people can join together and start a movement based on like concerns or like interests and have that movement conveyed by their representatives into law or into regulations or into something that represents their needs. We can't do that anymore. It takes millions of dollars to sit down in front of a United States Senator or House of Representative member now. And what you get out of that is predicated on how much money's in your bank account and how much you're willing to give up. It does not matter anymore how righteous your position is.
It seems as though in the last, I would say, 8 years, but I would say really in this last 6 years, is that as soon as one election over, they go right into raising money for the next. And it's like the people who are supposed to be looking out for the people who vote for them, soon as this person is voted in, he goes right on to trying to raise money for the next election.
It's all noise and distractions. It's election campaigning because you do need the money. I mean, they spend most of their day dialing for dollars. They're on the phone raising money because that's what they need to be reelected. But what they're there for, to handle the business of the people, they don't do anything.
Right.
You've got a guy, Paul Ryan, who in his entire time for Congress, he is now the Republican Party vice presidential nominee. In his entire time in Congress, he's passed 2 bills. I think he named a park after some local politician and named a dog after his shoe or a shoe after his dog. I mean, something very minor. He has no accomplishments to speak of. I'm not picking on the man just because he's a Republican, although that's a good reason to pick on him. I'm picking on the man because he exemplifies what this do-nothing Congress is all about. They aren't about the business of solving our problems and moving our interests forward. They represent a very small percentage of our population, the less than 1%, probably a tenth of the 1%. And in that, they have to come up with all these distractions and all these bells and whistles to keep people occupied and satiated that they're trying to do something for them when really they're not. And so when you get right down to it, you're not going to have anything accomplished. You're not going to have bills that are passed that mean anything, at least not very, very frequently, because they're not there to do that. That's not their intention. They don't want to do anything of consequence because then they'd be stepping on toes. You have to get right down to what they're there for. And most of these people are there for their own self-aggrandizement. They're there for their own pocketbook. They're there for their own legacy. So someday when they're having someone read their eulogy, they say he was a U.S. senator and he got this park named after us. But when you look at what they've done with their time in the government, supposedly representing the people, they haven't done that. And it's not designed to do that anymore. You see very, very few people, and there are some exceptions, but you see very, very few people who go out there and advocate for the people in the main within their district. And when I say in the main, I'm talking about the people who make less than $50,000 a year. The people who may not have a college degree, who may have had to drop out of high school to go to work. They deserve representation, but you're not going to get that in our government. You're not going to get that in our government unless you're connected. And that doesn't speak of democracy to me.
So, Doug, what do you think? You think we have a democracy or what?
I was thinking about this today. I didn't bring this up with you guys beforehand, but I mean, honestly, we're living in a banana republic.
Absolutely.
Literally. Maybe they don't have bananas here. We can call it, a Big Mac Republic or something because we're a bunch of fat people. The People's Republic of Walmart or something. I don't know. But we don't, and I talked to my dad about this, who is, a staunch Republican. I don't know if he's as staunch as he was 10 years ago. I kind of been wearing him down I don't know, whatever. I've been eroding his foundation, I guess, in that regard. I'm not, and I don't like either party. You guys know that. But I think that this country, people realize, like I said before, that the two parties, they're much more alike than they are different. And when is the last time the federal government did anything of substance for the American people? They passed a big law that actually mattered to people. The Americans with Disabilities Act, is that the last one that's had a lasting positive impact? I mean, Obamacare, people could say it's a good first step, but when you look at the fine-tuning of the bill was written by insurance companies, and it was put forth as a government bill. It's not a government bill. It's a fascist corporate health care bill where they mandate that you have to buy private insurance. They couldn't get Medicare for everybody. They had to have the private insurance companies write a bill where you'd have you'd be forced to buy private insurance or you would be penalized by the IRS. To me, that's not solving the problem. That's only lining the pockets of the people that created all our problems in the first place.
Well, see, that's part of the agenda, because if you look at what we had prior to the Affordable Care Act and what we have now, I think the Affordable Care Act is an improvement, but it's not the right kind of improvement.
No.
I like the idea that you can't throw people off the rolls for pre-existing conditions. I like the idea that you can have young people able to stay in their parents' insurance until they're 26 years old. I like a lot of things about the Affordable Care Act because they're fair. But again, you have all these nuggets of goodness surrounded by this corporate construct that tells you that my money must go into the pockets of Prudential and Aetna and all these other for-profit insurance companies, because that's the only way we're going to get this done. We cannot just go Medicare for all, which is the logical thing to do.
Yeah.
We have an administrative setup where the administrative fees is 2 to 3%, 97% goes to the actual benefit of the people who need the health care. In the private insurance realm, I think the percentage is something like 8 or 9% right off the top goes to administrative fees, goes to salaries, goes to bonuses, goes to CEOs. You had this guy named Dollar Bill McGuire, who had a $1.6 billion retirement golden parachute when he left his company after making $600 or $700 million a year. In order to generate that kind of money, you have to deny a lot of people a lot of coverage. Somebody can't get their gallbladder removed. Somebody can't get this stent put in their heart. Someone can't get this tumor removed from their brain. Someone can't get this medication for the blood pressure because Dollar Bill McGuire needs this $1.6 billion retirement. So I agree with Doug there. It should not be going to the private to private insurance companies. We don't need private insurance companies for health care. But because of the apparatus we're set in, I think the Affordable Care Act is better than the alternative, i.e. nothing, but it's still not desirable relative to what we could easily have if we just had a government-run, one-size-fits-all healthcare program like all the rest of the developed world has.
Yeah.
It's not like it's an exotic scheme that came from Mars or Jupiter. We see it all over the world.
Yeah.
It works.
Yeah.
You have one bill. It goes into the system. You walk in there with no copay. Hell, in England, they pay your transportation costs to go to the doctor.
Mm-hmm.
But we can't see past that because somehow that's European.
Yeah.
That's bad.
Yep.
You know, that's socialist.
Mm-hmm.
You know, well, give me some socialism when it comes to my health care.
Mm-hmm.
You know, let me have less of this Wall Street oligarchic control of my life, and let me have control based on me telling my representative what I want and what I need, and him acting on those directions.
Mm-hmm.
Because if he doesn't, I vote him out. We don't have the power to vote people in and out now. So again, we don't have a democracy.
Before we end this, I want to talk a little bit about what's happening now in the in this country. We have 2 million and some people in jail. 50% of them are blacks. What do you think about that? What do you think? What do you think is happening?
It's the new Jim Crow. It's absolutely the new Jim Crow. We have a little bit north of 300 million people in this country. China has 1,300,000,000 plus people. We have more people in prison here than we do in China. It's a for-profit scheme. It funnels money out of the government into the pockets of cronies because you set up these privatized prisons. You fund those prisons from government coffers into the pockets of vendors who supply blankets and supply prepackaged food and supply rakes, and they supply, concrete for the cells. And they make money off the system. And then to ice the cake, you take those prisoners and you have them work for private industry for slave wages, literally, so that some company can make a profit off the labor of incarcerated individuals who should be there working off a sentence because of some kind of crime against society. It's the new Jim Crow, man. It's what Michelle Alexander wrote about in her landmark book a couple years ago. It's a deliberate scheme to disenfranchise a very large portion of our electorate, young black males, to make money off of them, and to keep them off the streets where we can keep an eye on them. Because, when you're stealing trillions of dollars from Wall Street, you can't walk up on the corner and see Junebug smoking a joint. That's too much for his sensibilities. He can't steal in peace with that happening. So let's get that kid off the corner. He's wearing his high hat sideways, selling drugs. How are the drugs getting into the country? How are the drugs? How is all that money being laundered and moved through the system? How are all those assets being monetized so we can have the boats and the planes and the bank accounts in order to make a big multinational drug cartel function? We don't want to talk about that. We do want to address the kid on the corner who's selling it, but not too soon, mind you, because he's got a quota to hit. So I think that the fact that our present system is so over populated and bursting at the seams, again, is by design. It's just another example of how we don't have a representative government, how we don't have a healthcare system that's designed and predicated based on our needs, and now we have this prison industrial complex that's designed to exploit us further. You add all those things together plus others, and you look at our society, and it's toxic. It has nothing to do with democracy.
What do you see, Doug?
Well, I agree completely with Dennis. And I think if you're going to talk about if you had to single out one policy of the last 40 years of this United States that we live in that has been an abject failure for everybody on Main Street, it's not been a failure for Wall Street. They launder the drug money. They've been caught in federal court laundering drug money, and nobody goes to jail for it. It's not a failure for the CIA, who's the biggest drug dealer in the history of maybe the free world, or the world in general. They've been busted since the 1980s of trafficking cocaine and marijuana and everything else. You have the federal government, who certain elements of the government send guns to Mexican drug cartels, and then they allow those guns are then used to kill federal agents, and there's a big stink about that right now, the Fast and Furious scandal, which again started not under this current administration, but the same thing was the program started under the previous one, the Bush administration. It is a failure on the level that surpasses what Prohibition was a failure, the alcohol prohibition from, was it 1919 to 1933? It has been much worse. It has destroyed cities. It has annihilated families. It has sent people to prison for simple usage. It sent addicts to prison when they should have been sent to treatment. They get sent to prison. It has been, as Dennis said, it is a Jim Crow system. It is the new Jim Crow, and it has been designed, as that book lays out, Michelle Alexander's book lays out, it's been done by design to destroy, in my opinion, the civil rights movement and all the gains that were made in the 50s and 60s, and not only among minorities in this country, but among people in general. We moved forward in the 50s and 60s as a society, and the war on drugs was one of the elements that the oligarchs used to stamp their foot out on it.
One of my, we was talking about the things that's happened, but one of the things that I always look back at is 64 and 65, when we got the Voting Rights Act and all of those things. To me, that was important, and to see now how the Republicans are trying to tread back on that, it really outraged. I really get outrageous about that.
Well, you had democracy in 64 and 65. Although it had the initial death blow had already been administered November 22nd, 1963. And now you fast forward to the 21st century, totally different society.
Okay, I guess we're going to have to end it right there. But my name is Ammahad Shekarakki, and join us again next week for more Street Talk. Peace.
Don't let anybody make you think that God chose America as his divine, messianic force to be a sort of policeman of the whole world. God has a way of standing before the nations with judgment, and it seems that I can hear God saying to America, you're too arrogant. If you don't change your ways, I will rise up and break the backbone of your power. And I'll place it in the hands of a nation that doesn't even know my name. Be still and know that I'm God.